Hi, everybody. Today we're going to be talking about Chapter 16, Social Emotional Development in Adolescence. So we always start with our fact or fiction. And number one, generally speaking, parent adolescent conflict is about routine day to day concerns, and that is actually true. Number two, early exclusive romance signifies maturity. Not true at all. These are not mature adult relationships. Number three, thinking about committing suicide is actually quite rare among high school students. This is true. And number four, major crimes are more likely to be committed during adolescence and emerging adulthood than in any other period of life. And this is false. We do know they take risks, but not in that way. As today's adolescents move toward achieving their identity, they should be aware that their context is not identical to that of their parents, and each person has a unique combination of genes and alleles. Common role confusion behaviors includes mind-numbing bouts of video games or watching TV, jumping from romance to romance, disorganized thinking, procrastination, or avoidance of issues and actions. In foreclosure, teens might follow roles and customs transmitted from their parents or culture, never exploring alternatives. They also may choose oppositional negative identities, for instance, like as gang members. Society provides many moratoria, such as college, that allow adolescents to postpone identity achievement, though moratorium often peaks at age 19. This respite allows an individual time to achieve identity in arenas described by Erickson: political, ethnic identity, and vocational identity. An identity may not be achieved until after adolescence as individuals emerge into adulthood. So, adolescents are really on the path to identity. And basically, what roles do they adopt? You know, there's identity achievement, there's role confusion, there's moratorium, and there's foreclosure. So, identity achievement, Erickson's term for the attainment of identity, or the point at which a person understands who he or she is a unique individual. For role confusion, a situation in which an adolescent does not seem to know or care what his or her identity is. And this is also called identity diffusion. Foreclosure is Erickson's term for premature identity formation, which occurs when an adolescent adopts parents' or society's roles and values wholesale without questioning or analysis. And moratorium is an adolescent's choice of a socially acceptable way to postpone making identity achievement decisions. And for example, that's going to college. Few adolescents totally reject religion if they grow up following a particular faith, partly because religion provides meaning as well as coping skills. Political identity brings up identity politics, which is the tendency to identify politically with others of one's group, such as those of the same race, religion, ethnicity, or national origin. A century ago, teenagers could more easily envision themselves in their future roles and jobs, but today, few, if any, are ready for a lifetime career at age 18. Erickson's term sexual identity has been replaced by gender identity, which is a person's acceptance of the roles and behaviors that society associates with biological categories of male and female. Normal parent-adolescent conflict peaks in early adolescence, especially between mothers and daughters. Keep in mind that some bickering may indicate a healthy family, since close relationships almost always include some conflict. So, one typical way in which adolescents and parents relate to one another is through adolescent egocentrism, and that's when they're thinking about exclusively on themselves, the bickering. Granting greater autonomy. As adolescents get older, parents may grant more autonomy, often with positive affect. And then better communication and balance. Both parents and teenagers try to balance the need for independence and closeness with less disclosure, but improved communication as the young person matures. And this is just examples of dialogue between parents and children. So, the roles of peers and peer pressure. Peer pressure is usually considered a negative force as when adolescent peers encourage one another to defy adult authority. This experiment in peer facilitation involved adolescents ages 13 to 16, emerging or young adults ages 18 to 22, and adults over age 24. In this experiment, everyone was randomly assigned to two conditions: playing a video driving game alone or with two strangers of the same age and sex. As you drive, every so often the screen will flash a yellow light indicating that soon, in one of several seconds, a wall will appear. Your goal is to drive as long as possible but brake before crashing into the wall. Points are gained for travel time. A crash erases the points from that round. You'll play the game for 15 rounds. And this is what they found. Playing alone, all the groups averaged 1 crash per 15-round session. What happened to adolescents when in the company of their peers? Huge amounts of crashes. So it shows you that when they are driving with peers, they're more likely to take risks. And then when they get to young adults, they're still more likely to take the risks. However, it goes down. And then as adults, you can see alone or with peers is pretty much on the same level. For 30 years, the Youth Risk Behavior Survey has asked high school students from all over the U.S. dozens of confidential questions about their behavior. The findings in this survey indicate that in 2007, fewer young people were having intercourse. Most first intercourse occurred in a committed relationship. Also, most sexually active adolescents reported using condoms. Also, every survey finds that norms vary markedly from crowd to crowd, school to school, city to city, and nation to nation. For instance, in 2009, twice as many 9th through 12th graders in Milwaukee as in Seattle said they had had intercourse. That's 63 versus 29%. So, what are some findings about sexual behavior? Teens who had sex by the end of high school in 1991 versus 2007, so it's actually decreasing. Sexually experienced girls reported that they were in a steady relationship when they first had sex. That's a very high percentage. And then teens reporting using a condom during last intercourse, girls and boys. And fortunately, that is a high percentage that we want to see. The crucial test of sex education is not whether adolescents can learn facts, most pass multi-choice questions, but whether their knowledge affects their behavior. A controlled study of sex education in the United Kingdom noted that whether or not an adolescent becomes sexually active depends more on family, peers, and culture than on information from classes. So what are some studies shown about adolescence and sex? As a parent, so this is questions. As a parent, you know your 12-year-old daughter hugged and kissed a boy for a long time. And these are what the choices could be. 5%. As a 12-year-old, you've hugged and kissed a boy for a long time. The actual 38%. So this is showing the differences. U.S. adolescents couples that have discussed the risks of pregnancy and disease before becoming sexually active. 50%. Like to see that higher. Approximately how much less rates of teenage pregnancy are in most European nations than in the United States, curriculum being one of the many reasons. 50%. In a longitudinal study, approximately the number of students who had sex by age 16, 4 to 6 years after participating in an abstinence-only program? 50%. So that's a good question. Do abstinence-only programs work? In a longitudinal study, approximately the number of students who had sex by age 16, 4 to 6 years after not participating in an abstinence-only program? 50%. So that statistics say the exact same. Researchers tested children in grades 4 through 6. Then they looked at the subjects' depression levels in high school and explored participants' particular high school crowds. Popular jock crowds became happier during high school. Children destined to be in the brains crowd felt happiest during elementary school. Burnouts were more depressed than any other group, both in late elementary and high school. Some adolescents sink down into clinical depression, which is a deep sadness that disrupts all normal, regular activities. This kind of depression involves feelings of helplessness, lethargy, worthlessness, and the last for 2 weeks or more. So what might the relationship be between depression and crowds? Crowds, a large group of adolescents who have something in common but who are not necessarily friends. So if we look at this, we're seeing that the most depressed would be feelings of depression would be burnouts. Suicide ideation usually has some serious emotional, intellectual, or cognitive overtones. Adolescents are less likely than adults to kill themselves. While suicide ideation during adolescence is commonly completed, suicides are not. So they may think about suicide, but they're not actually doing it. The U.S. annual rate of completed suicide for people aged 15 to 19, in school or not, is about 8 per 100,000 or 0.008%. The term parasuicide is a preferred term because seriousness of intent is difficult to discern amidst the emotions typical in adolescence. So this is showing the suicide rate in the United States, and you can see that it is not the highest in adolescence. Sadness and anger. Neurological impairment, either inborn or caused by early experiences, increases the risk that a child will become a life course persistent offender, or a person whose criminal activity typically begins in early adolescence and continues throughout life. A career criminal. Adolescents at all income levels may become adolescents limited offenders, or a person whose criminal activity stops by age 21. These adolescents may outgrow their criminal behavior and may be protected from life snares such as quitting school, entering prison, drug addiction, or early parenthood. So, how's delinquency predicted? Short attention span, hyperactivity, autistic tendencies, cigarette smoking, victim of severe child abuse. From adolescents, primarily context based, it would be more having deviant friends, drug and alcohol use, jail, violent, and unstable. So, this is the end of chapter 16. Please go to the forum section and respond to the discussion question on morality. Thanks.